Hey, CS10, now we're going to talk about grids. We're going to figure out what makes this grid look the way it looks. And once you know that, you'll probably be able to mess around with the other grids, I hope, and have, fun with that. Okay, so let's go look at the code. This is our default grid that you're getting from the assignment. It's not any of the ones you want to hand in, but it's a good place to start. So just to let you know, you're probably not going to change anything in the HTML. There's a couple new things to mention in here, and I'll explain what those are. The main thing is, like, this might change when you go to move on to the next one. We talked about that in the last video. Before we move on from this, because we aren't going to touch it very much, I just wanted to mention about some of these tags. Tags like header, nav, main, aside, footer. Basically, these tags here are just divs with special names. And their names sort of imply what their purpose is. This helps websites like Google to navigate your website in order to properly categorize it and link it into the its big search engine. So people have moved from just using the word div to sort of names that make more sense. Names that describe what is inside of that div. So, we're not really having anything in, we just have these words inside of it because it was just a layout website, just to practice with layouts. So we're not actually making a content filled website here, but that's what these are coming from. They're basically just divs. You'll see that we're still using a div, this container div. So, if you want to have kind of default or divs that you don't want necessarily to have meanings other than just like, they're containers of things, then that's a good thing to use them for. Yeah, so here we go. So we're going to go and take a look now at the actual style here and how our grid is created. We know that we have a bunch of divs inside of a big div, and they have special names. So let's go and see. So first of all, our container is the white box that holds everything else. It's got a certain width to it. And then this is where we build the grid. We're actually building the grid inside the container. So we're subdividing that container into a bunch of rows and columns. So just to be clear, the white box here that's sort of surrounding everything, that is our container, the div class equals container. And yeah, we see the grid kind of forming. The inside, colorful boxes here, those are the various inside divs, the header, navigation, main, and so on. And they don't really have a lot going on inside of their CSS, and you probably don't need to touch them too much. But I will mention sort of how all this works. So once you've turned on display grid, that means containers broken into a grid. And then we're going to define a bunch of grid template areas. So this is what lets you build your layout. It doesn't, this is just responsible for positioning the different divs, the headers, the mains, and so on. How wide the columns are and how tall the rows are, that comes to grid template rows and grid template columns. So, organizing these things and sizing them are sort of in two different places. We also have like the gap that's between the, different parts of the grid template areas, and a padding is sort of a surrounding the whole inside of the container div. So those are the different parts of it. I'll just mention that in order for this grid template areas to work, these words, I know they're the same as these divs, but it's actually not the name of the divs that matter. It's actually that inside of each of these sort of the CSS for each div, we've defined the name of the grid area for header. And they are the same, which is good because that helps us to keep things straight. But without this line of code, it wouldn't just work automatically. You do have to define header as a grid area, and its name is header. Nav is also a grid area, and its name is nav, and so on. You want to do that for all of your different ones, all the way down to footer. Once you've done that, now you can start kind of playing around with the way that these structure together. So notice this is sort of one row, a second row, a third row, and a fourth row. And we can see they're broken into two columns, although maybe you can't see it too well. If I space it out, you can kind of see that these are broken into sort of two different columns. So the way it works, you'll notice that we have the header goes straight across the top row, the footer goes straight across the bottom row, and in the two middle rows, we have the left-hand side. I had to think about that. I always do my L's. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's all good. So, the left-hand side is broken into the nav and the sidebar, but the right-hand side is broken into main and main. It's actually not broken at all. So you can kind of vertically stack or horizontally stack the same areas to create kind of larger portions, so that a particular div can spread over multiple rows or multiple columns. So that's a really handy thing to do. So I'll just confirm that we do see that here, right? I'll try and put them side by side. I'll stick this over here, and I'll stick this over here. So we can see like the header, that's the green one, that goes across the whole website because the two headers here, the navigation, the blue one, and the red or orange or whatever sidebar, like those are stacked on top of each other, and they're only on the left-hand side because I only put them on the left-hand side. The main merged together into one big thing because I said, on row 2 and row 3, it's going to be the main, and they're stacked on top of each other, so it creates that stack. At the bottom again, we have the footer, so the footer goes straight across all the way because that's the 4th row, and there it is. Just to be clear that hopefully that makes sense, but if it doesn't make sense, let's try putting in like main here, for example. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen? Let's see. So what happens is, well, main goes down further, right? Now we have 3 mains stacked on top of each other. We've cut the footer off, so it's just in this one part, and there it is. So you see how that works? What if we wanted, there are some things, I guess, that are impossible. Like, what if I was to put main here? What would happen? That's kind of weird. Like, we got main, and then main. Does it make like a L shape? And the answer is it breaks. So these grid template areas have to be boxes. You can't make L shapes or things like that. You got to kind of stick to the shapes of boxes, rectangles, if you will. There's probably ways we could make it look like they're merged together, but really at the bottom of it, all the divs are rectangles and they have to stay that way. So that's a limitation. What if you wanted to have like just main just take up that whole center? Like goodbye navigation. We could put main. Oops, I'm in the wrong window. We could put main here and main here. And it's just so much main. It's going to take up a whole rectangle in the center. Goodbye navigation. I'll just make sure I save that. Boom. Now it's just one big main all in the center. So that's the story. I'll put it back to the way it was, and then we'll talk about these guys here. What are these all about? So let's put it back. All right, so here's what we started off. So notice that our header is the same size as our footer, but then the 2 middle rows are bigger. they're taller. So what's going on there? So I don't know if you can see it, but we have divided this grid. We have, first of all, 4 rows. And these are the rows here, and these are the columns. So we have 2 columns. And then FR, if you recall from the previous grid video, stands for fraction. So the way fraction works is you add up all the fractions. We have 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2 is 5, plus 1 is 6. And then each of these is like how much of 6. So this is 1/6, 2/6, 2/6, and 1/6. It's hard to say. So basically, they go in order. So this is the top row. It's 1/6 of the height of the whole thing. The next row is 2/6 the height of the whole thing. And this one is 3/6 the height of the whole thing. And this is 1/6 the height of the whole thing. So you can see why the top and bottom, the header and the footer, are the same height because that's the orders. Row 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's row 1 and row 4. The middle 2 are the same because that's the way we programmed it. So that's sort of how that works. Just to be clear, what would happen if I made this, 2? What would happen? Well, the footer would definitely get bigger. But we also have a larger number of fraction now. So now we have 7 fractions. So now we got this will be 1/7, 2/7, and so on. So it'll be a little bit awkward if we refresh. Oh look, it got bigger. So that's good. We sort of have some minimum sizes on these, so I guess they didn't like collapse on them. But yeah, we created now a bigger footer as a result. What about these columns? Oh my gosh, these columns. We got 2 columns, and therefore I can only sort of spread them out here. But what if I wanted to like have more? What if I wanted to have 3 columns or something? So you could just put in another column. I could say this could be 3FR. This will now have this broken into fifths. I'll have 2 columns that are 1/5 and 1/5, and then a third column that's 3/5. Now this isn't really set up for that, so I'd have to modify this to have another column. But I could do that. Like maybe I want my header to go all the way across, but now maybe I want I don't know. Maybe main's gonna go over here too. And then I have to put in my footer as well. So now I have 3 columns. Maybe just to illustrate a little bit better, let's put the nav here and the sidebar over here. So I have 3 columns. Maybe I'll make this 2. So the first column, this one, will be 1/6. The middle column will be 2/6. And then the third column will be 3/6. So we'll see the kind of different sizes. So you should expect to see 3 columns now. The left one will be the smallest, the middle one will be medium, and the right one will be bigger. Yeah, there we go. And you'll see that the header still spans across the whole thing because I say header, header, header. It spans across the rows. Same with footer, footer, footer. Spans across. But again, just like we did in our previous one, if I wanted to, make that go higher up, I could say sidebar up here as well. And then our sidebar will jump up. And you can see I can't quite fit it on, but the sidebar is the chunkiest one because it's, it's got the 3FR here. It's got the biggest size. And we can even that out if we want to. We can make them all the same. Now I can refresh that. And now you can see they've all kind of simplified. Yeah, so you can kind of play with this structure once you've created your grid and just kind of fill things in. Maybe I'll make the nav float down into the bottom, right? And now the footer gets bumped over here because it's kind of following this plan and using these as like the sizing information. Yeah, there you go. That's kind of pretty. I'm not sure it was useful. Like, how valuable was this layout? But the important thing isn't like, to create a particular layout. The important thing right now is just to understand how we can mess around with the layouts so that when you have a layout that you would like to build, you have the power to do so. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense about how the grid works as you're trying to recreate your grids. Remember, you're going to be, editing this code, mostly just going to be this code right here. You're going to be editing that. And you're going to be putting it into the different files. So by the end, we'll have all the 5 layouts in the different CSS files, same HTML file each time. Slightly, just linking different CSS files. Okay, so there you go. That's grids. I hope it's making sense. And I look forward to assisting you as you go forward with this assignment. Thanks, everybody.